really the research, but also the grit and determination to continue to move forward when things get really, really difficult, especially during, in this case, that particular race, and just putting one foot in front of the other. Relentless forward progress is what I call it, becomes a challenge. So it's working through that, knowing a huge lesson learned for me and applied to life is you may have a plan, but that plan, when things change, to be able to adapt, accept it, move on, and figure it out in order to move through. And to me, that's a huge lesson I learned from my experiences in Leadville, and in particular, the Leadville 100. And I try to apply on a day-to-day basis of working through things.
It's awesome to be together again, and I've been looking forward to talking to Tony for a while. And if you are not familiar with Tony or his story, he has an awesome book, which, as he pointed out, I think last week, is a great stocking stuffer. It's like stocking size, you know, so it's not a hard book to read, but it's an awesome, inspiring book to read about grit and determination and doing really hard things. And so I'm looking forward to hearing about your story, Tony. Thought you might start off and just tell us a little bit about the early years of developing that grit. What, where'd you grow up? What inspired you to go into the Army? What were some of your Army experiences that helped you develop that grit? And then go into talking about running Leadville.
Sure, Andy. Thank you for the opportunity. I know a few of you, obviously Joel Goldberg. I've connected with Angie, haven't met her yet. I know Mike Kinney very well, met David Komar. So I appreciate the opportunity to, establish more relationships with great folks, great leaders, and also the opportunity to just convey kind of my story. I guess I'll go back to where I'm originally from. I think it's important. I know it continues to be part of who I am, Randy and everyone. I grew up in rural Minnesota in a town of 715 people at the time called Bruton, Minnesota, about 2 hours from the Twin Cities. Why is that important? Graduating class of 34. It was a great area. Father was a small business owner that the business is still in existence today, still has a family name. There's no financial affiliation, but it's still in business after about going on over 60 years. And my mother was from Germany, actually, and grew up during World War II, born in 1932. Both are deceased. But point being, I think a lot of that and my parents' kind of grit and determination, especially, both their stories are phenomenal. First college graduate in my family, there were two of us, my sister and myself. Again, great place to grow up. One of the things that I was tied to for the military was I wanted to put myself through college. That was really my only goal. I enlisted my junior year in high school in 1983 under what was called the delayed entry program, with the intent after graduation from high school to go into the military for 2 years and pay for college and leave the military. That was the plan. Things transpired as they all do in all of our lives. Sought an opportunity to apply to the U.S. Military Academy Preparatory School on my own. Each of the major academies has a prep school. Was fortunately accepted to go to that 10 to 12 month course, and then earned an appointment to the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, ultimately graduating in 1990. That led obviously to become an officer in the military. I chose the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for two reasons. I wanted to have a technical skill, but I also wanted to do the warfighter things associated with infantry, armor, and all the various entities. Attended Ranger School, chose to do that. I know folks like Mike Kinney know it's a volunteer effort. You don't have to go, chose to do that. And I think that's part of the story too, is challenging yourself to do hard endeavors that you want to achieve. 26-year military career, brushing through a lot of it, saw a lot of various things, as everybody does in that sort of career when you're in anything for 20 plus years. Multiple combat deployments. My last tour that brought us to brought myself and my family, and I'll get into, I'll explain them in a minute here, because they're a very important part of this whole piece, this whole pie. What brought us to this region was a command selection, they call it, to command the, or be in charge of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Kansas City District. That's a 3-year tour of duty for an active duty Army colonel. That was in 2010. That in that role, you serve in the capacity. It's very different than a lot of other Army command positions. You're actually in charge of a primarily civilian organization. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has about 36,000 people, and about 800 of those are military. So it's a very unique relationship that is led by military officers that goes way back in history to 1802 with the establishment of West Point and building a corps of engineers to build then a fledgling nation. But that history continues today with the Army Corps of Engineers having military officers really running in charge of, responsible for a primarily civilian organization. Couple major things transpired during that time. In my time, 2 major disasters at the same time. We can maybe talk about that in terms of building grit. The Joplin tornado recovery in May of 2011, 162 people perished. It was I think the 5th worst tornado in the history of the U.S. Our organization, my organization at the time, was called in to lead that effort for cleanup with the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And then simultaneously, there was record Missouri River flooding. So it was managing 2 major disasters simultaneously, and just happened to be the person that was currently in the hot seat at that particular time. So learned a ton on leading through disasters, etc. Finished the tour in 2013, and we decided as a family to stay in the Kansas City region and transition out of the military for a variety of reasons. My wife Susan and I just celebrated our 25th year anniversary yesterday. So that's probably, of all the things you talk about, that's a huge accomplishment for us as a couple. And we've got 3 great kids. Our son Nate is a senior at Northeastern University in Boston. Our daughter Abby is a senior at Blue Valley Northwest High School. And our youngest daughter Kate is a middle schooler in 8th grade at Harmony Middle School here in Overland Park. Current position, the Public Works Director for the City of Overland Park. Been in this position for 6 years. Overland Park, 200,000 people, large scale city, 2nd largest city in the state of Kansas, 2nd largest city in the Kansas City region. And I have the privilege to lead 141 folks on a day-to-day basis, really responsible for all the infrastructure associated with a large scale city. So all of those, I think, when you combine them, I don't know if there's one thing in particular that stands out, but I think it's a variety of challenging positions that even things that you didn't know were going to transpire, that you really, when you're in the seat of a mantle of leadership, you have to get through it. And that's not only an individual piece, it's the teams that you're leading, but also the teams and the folks in that leadership group that are assisting in the process collectively to accomplish a goal. A little bit on the side, we help, Randy said about the book Embracing Grit. One thing I've been doing for over 30 years now is running marathons or ultra marathons. That continues to be a part of me. It keeps me grounded, it keeps me fit, it keeps me mentally and physically alert. That's an important piece for me personally, call it self-care. And we can obviously chat about that piece associated with the Leadville 100, the Leadville Trail Marathon, and the support and creating Team Leadville along the way as well. So I think collectively all those things come together to really establish kind of my roots all the way up to now of being in challenging positions and hopefully producing good results for, in this case, the public that we serve.
I want to go to Leadville, and then we'll come back to leadership after that. But you know, there was a paragraph in here that I thought could really resonate with folks. Did completing the Leadville change my life? In some ways, yes. I think that kind of suffering has a positive impact on you. The experiences in Leadville gave me a clearer perspective on my physical and mental capabilities, helped me define what's truly important, and forced me to confront ever-changing conditions, yet keep going forward. All these things are what's required in the game of life. My biggest lesson, it's about putting yourself on the journey, not just the result. We get really focused and intimidated by failure. And folks go through hard times and get discouraged, and you've turned that into that you can take that pain and that suffering and those discouraging situations and turn into something positive. Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, I think well, there's a lot of different ways we can go on that, Randy. I want to talk a little bit about Leadville in particular and give those on the call here that may not know that much about Leadville and why I think that venue is special in a lot of ways. So Leadville is the highest incorporated city, sits at 10,152 feet in Colorado. Tough city, hard rock mining town. If you haven't been there, it's a boomer bust city, has been since inception of the gold and silver and now lead or molybdenum era. And at one point, many people don't know, had 40,000 people in the late 1800s. Right, it was one of the largest cities, if not the largest city in Colorado at the time. And there were a lot of prestigious people that went there. Ulysses S. Grant visited, et cetera, et cetera. Has the oldest, one of the oldest, gosh, I can't remember, opera houses west of the Mississippi, I believe the oldest. So it was a very prestigious city at one point. Now it has about 2,600 folks. Right now, their primary piece is the Leadville Race Series. That includes a series of races, including a marathon, a 50-mile bike and run, and the iconic Leadville 100. What started that race series was a friend of mine, and I know Mike Kinney knows him as well, is Ken Klober. Ken was a hard rock miner. He created the Leadville Race Series when the Climax molybdenum mine closed overnight in 1982, and the unemployment rate in Leadville went to 90% overnight. Ken's idea, and Ken is a super guy, former state senator, Army veteran during the Vietnam era. I have a lot of respect and am fairly close with Ken as much as he can be from this distance. But Ken's idea was, we don't want to become a gambling town like a lot of others in Colorado. So I'm going to create a race, and we're going to go 100 miles, and we're going to do it over Hope Pass, and which is 12,600 feet, 50 miles out, 50 miles back, and we're going to do it in August. He approached the hospital administrator in Leadville with the idea, and the hospital administrator said, Ken, you're going to kill somebody. I won't administer this race. And Ken's reply was, well, if we do kill somebody, then we'll be on the map, won't we? And we'll get a lot of attention. No one has died during that race, but Leadville also during World War II, nearby Camp Hale served as a high altitude training ground for the 10th Mountain Division, which is now at Fort Drum, New York, to prepare US troops for high altitude training. So all of those combined for me, blue collar town, gritty town, tough town. If it sits again over 2 miles high, and to challenge yourself in that environment is very tough. want to talk about the Leadville 100 in particular. I don't want to make it that, hey, it's so hard that no one can do it, but I do want to put it in the perspective. Some of you may or may not have heard of a famous ultra athlete named Dean Karnazes. He's, I think, gone 260 miles at one point in one running. But Dean Karnazes has been to Leadville 3 times and has only accomplished going through that race once, his 3rd time. The first time literally almost killed him. Give you another example, Kara Goucher, a former U.S. Olympic marathoner, is now transitioned in her, for a marathoner, she's, I think, around 40. So her prime of running elite Olympic marathons is done, but she entered the trail running, and her first inaugural trail run was the Leadville Trail Marathon. I was out there at the same time in 2019. Runner's World did an article on it. Her comment, the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. And that was a marathon for a former Olympic US athlete. The 3rd example I'll give is in 2018, my team that I founded, Team Leadville, that supports veteran causes, mainly Warriors Ascent. We can talk about that. We had former Major League Baseball player, and Joel and I talked about this a little bit, Eric Burns, and he had his own small team with a gentleman named Lance Armstrong that was out there. And that's a story within itself, but I will say they showed up and met every commitment they said they would do. But Lance Armstrong's comment, and I know there are various things that you may or may not think of Lance Armstrong. I'm not here to say anything about Lance Armstrong. He showed up, he met his commitment. His comment, though, after that 4-person team that supported us, his comment was, that was the hardest athletic event I did outside of one of the time trials for the Tour de France. So that just gives the idea of how challenging that environment is for some very elite athletes, let alone a really non-elite athlete like myself, to put yourself on the journey to tackle something like the Leadville 100. So I guess I hope that answered some of what you're after, Randy, with respect to Leadville and what that venue does or how it can challenge you. I think it's a great venue, and the reason, one of the reasons created Team Leadville to do a high altitude marathon race to start and finish as a team was Leadville itself and the challenging environment that it gives. Because once you accomplish that, not talking so much about myself, I'm talking about the teams that we bring out there, I think it brings it to a different level for them, and it is somewhat transformational. I think if you asked any of the 63 runners that we've had in our 6-year existence as Team Leadville, and by the way, all 63 have completed it, including 11 first-time marathoners. Now, we did a virtual run in 2020. We had 7 out there actually on the actual course, but we've had 56 runners actually on the Leadville course, but all 56 runners, including 11 first-time marathoners, have made it through that race together. And that is, I'm very proud of that fact. And that's pretty hard to do. It's hard to get 4 people across the street, let alone up to 13,185 feet for the Leadville Trail Marathon. So the venue, I think, it serves a great purpose for challenging individuals to do uncommon things.
Yeah, and that was generally, one of the big things I took from the book was mentally preparing yourself to push on, despite the obstacles, and times you were discouraged and times you hurt. And you develop that from one race to the next even more, that ability to push on. And I think that's something, while most of the people on here may never run 100 miles, there are times we need to push on. And why don't you talk a little bit about how you developed that from one year to the next? Yeah,
Randy, I think one thing, and I know Joel knows this, and Mike Kinney, obviously, because Joel's read the book. I didn't make it through in 2013 at that race. Leadville, you have 30 hours to complete the Leadville 100. You have 30 hours to complete it in between. there are time cuts that you have to make, or they pull you off the course, whether you're still moving or not. You're just not moving fast enough. So in 2013, that race, I went from the marathon distance, having run multiple Boston marathons, now 13 Boston marathons, which is the gold standard for marathoning, 12 years straight as well. So I came in with obviously some pretty high level marathoning experience, but I jumped from the 26.2 mile distance of the marathon to the 100 miler and in Leadville. Not exactly the smartest move, but I kind of knew what I was getting into, had done a lot of research on the race, had trained out there, but what was not really, in retrospect, ready for the mental aspect and the nutritional aspect of getting through that race. So in 2013, made that first effort with a crew, et cetera, and was pulled off the course at the 60-mile mark. And I talk about it in the book. And it was an unceremonious end. As you talk about pushing through, a lot of us, these are, I mean, everybody on this call, me excluded, high-level leaders, have accomplished many things in life. We're not used to not accomplishing things that you set out to do. So it was really, for me, a kick in the gut. I mean, again, it's at the end of the day, it's a race. However, we don't set out to do things not to achieve them. So really then became, okay, what do you do with that? You go back, do you attempt that race again, knowing now that you know more about it? And sometimes it's a little more intimidating when you know more about it and what you have to get into and the training involved and making some adjustments, but made the decision in late 2013 to enter then the first lottery for the Leadville 100 in 2014, and was selected, luckily or unluckily. You know, part of me was like, well, if I put the lottery in and I'm not accepted, at least I tried and I can, you know, chalk that up, but was accepted. So now you're like, okay, now you're going down the path again that you know well. And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over again and expecting a different result. Well, I had to make some adjustments, learning from the 2013 experience, put those adjustments into place along with my crew. And luckily, if you want to call it success, was able to complete the race in 29 hours and 31 minutes. And what I also learned that process coming from 900 feet here in the Kansas City region, the margin for error, especially for a non-elite athlete in that race, is razor thin. Things have to go your way. Not only is there the physical, the mental, and the nutritional piece, there's a little bit of luck involved for maybe weather or everything else. But it is definitely a disadvantage coming from 900 feet, but you got to know that going in. It takes 3 weeks to fully acclimatize. That's what I've learned through the science. And unless you're in Leadville or a high altitude place for 3 weeks, I'm not. I don't have that kind of time to take 3 weeks off and acclimatize and get your red blood cells up, et cetera. So you just got to know going in on how to keep your heart rate low and what aspects that you've got to tackle differently than somebody coming from high altitude. So all of those things combined, really the research, but also the grit and determination to continue to move forward when things get really, really difficult, especially during, in this case, that particular race, and just putting one foot in front of the other. Relentless forward progress is what I call it, becomes a challenge. So it's working through that, knowing a huge lesson learned for me and applied to life is you may have a plan, but that plan, when things change, to be able to adapt, accept it, move on, and figure it out in order to move through. And to me, that's a huge lesson I learned from my experiences in Leadville, and in particular, the Leadville 100. And I try to apply on a day-to-day basis of working through things. This pandemic's a great example. Joel and I talked briefly about that, and I appreciated him bringing that into the conversation. Our teams have been working 10 straight months through the pandemic, and that has been a huge leadership challenge. and we're figuring it out. And our leaders, I'm very proud of our leaders in the city and the department of working through every day. There is a COVID related discussion on something, but we're doing it. Obviously I'm biased, but I've got the stats as well. We are doing it in a healthy manner. Employee safety and health is our #1 priority. Another big priority is maintaining essential services for the residents and public that we serve. But that the experiences I've been, I guess, fortunate enough to have been directly applicable to my current role in leading through a pandemic, and hopefully doing a good job there. And then obviously you'd have to talk to the folks that I'm leading on a day-to-day basis to get their perspective. But all of those combined, I think, is working through different challenges in a hopefully calm manner, having a plan, and then adjusting from that plan when things don't go exactly as you predicted. And that's been a daily occurrence in the current role that we play in working through the pandemic, as a good example.
You know, I imagine working for you is intimidating because you have this huge high bar of integrity and discipline and personal accountability. And so, but you've had these leadership roles, 140 people now, more people when you're in the Corps of Engineer. Yeah, how do you coach and counsel and motivate people on your teams that, you know, when you see them struggling, you see them flailing away, you see them discouraged? How do you take all of these things that you've built in your own life and teach those?
Yeah, I hope it's not intimidating for the folks. And I've learned a lot in transitioning from the military, Randy. It's a great topic. I didn't think we'd go kind of in this direction. I'll give you an example. Last Friday, I had the privilege, obviously with appropriate social distancing, but our oldest daughter's on the soccer team. It is the boyfriend of one of her teammates, and he is a young 18-year-old high school student, and he wanted to talk to me. He completed basic training last summer, and it's funny you say you're intimidating. The parents that had reached out and said, "Hey, our son would like to talk to you, but he's afraid to talk to you. He knows your background." And we had a great conversation. I think a couple things. I don't lead first with my military background. That's just not, it was a great experience. I'm very proud to have served and hopefully have coached, teach, and mentored folks. But now that I've transitioned out of the military, I've tried to take a very a calmer approach, maybe if you want to call it that, a more mentorship role, and powering down to empower subordinates and encourage them to ask questions, but kind of lead from behind. And I found that to work much better. The military is a very unique hierarchy that is very different than the non-military world. You got to remember, and all of you know, 0.5% of the U.S. population serves on active duty. 0.5%. The total amount of veterans, World War II all the way, Iraq, Afghanistan, et cetera, 7%. So you're rejoining a society coming out of the military that is 93% may not know much about the military. They support the military. So I think that the point is, I try to apply what I've learned in the military to those that I lead, but it's much more relational based than the military is based on relations. Don't get me wrong, but it's a hierarchy that is very well established. That the leader, what the leader says, kind of goes. Doesn't work that way out here in the non-military world. I'm not saying it's bad, but I think it really flexes in a good way your ability to lead and figure out how to get things done in an environment that's not as hierarchical, if that makes sense. So I think I think the other thing, though, you had mentioned, it could be intimidating working for someone. I think it's never compromising your standards and your values, but maybe leading in a different manner. The topic of leadership is fascinating to me. In my undergrad field of study was in leadership studies, and I'm in the seat every day on, communication, relationships, getting things done, setting a vision, setting a goal, accomplishing certain tasks. So I listen to a lot of consultants who maybe haven't been in those leadership roles. We actually have to apply it on a day-to-day basis. So I think it's setting hopefully setting a good climate, positive climate, still adhering to high standards and values, and coach, teach, mentor along the way, because ultimately, my goal is to, when I leave, get the next public works director for the city of Overland Park that's going to be successful, to lead and keep a tradition of hopefully good leaders in the city. Ultimately, that's one of my goals eventually whenever I should leave the position. So I hope that kind of answers the question, Randy.
Yeah, that's great. Great insights there, Tony. Let's go to some questions. Steve, I think, has a little great question about knees.
Yeah, I do have a question about knees. Tony, I missed my running. Ran about 15 half marathons, never made it to a marathon. And I don't regret doing that because I needed it for the stress relief in 2 previous careers. But in the process, I wore out the cartilage in both knees. My first question is, how do elite athletes not wear out different body parts? And then, so that's a personal thing. More professionally, I'm curious, your choice for public service organization leadership over private enterprise leadership. And thanks again, very impressed.
Sure. Steve, congratulations on that. And I'm not here to promote running, but I will say this, there's never been a definitive study that says running's bad for your knees. Just want to get that out there. That's not directed at Steve. I had, on a personal level, had microfracture surgery in 2015, and it was not due to running. I had a degenerative knee that was actually found out in my physical leaving the military, and eventually had microscopic surgery with Dr. Vincent Key, who I know Mike Kinney knows very well. And Dr. Key from KU Med did a tremendous job, a great guy who helps the Chiefs and Royals. And his mentality is, I don't want to operate just on athletes. I want common people. So when I went under the knife with Dr. Key, I said, Dr. Key, I'm not a professional athlete, but I was a professional soldier. And he kind of chuckled as he went to work. But I think not all elite athletes are as not injury prone, especially after they retire. I'll give a couple of, example, like Bill Rogers, back in the 70s was doing 120 miles a week, 4-time Boston and New York marathon winner. He's still running today. I believe he's in his 70s, but he's probably the exception. Athletes like that at a high level, and I can't speak to that. I'm not an elite athlete, but I've done some research on them. I think most of those, they because they put so much stress on their bodies at a younger age, and we're at the highest peak of performance, most of them are probably not on the running world able to continue to go on. What you often hear about are a lot of folks that maybe for whatever reason found the half marathon or 5K, 10K or marathon later in life and didn't have that, continued stress and abuse on their bodies, and are able to successfully complete races into their 50s, 60s, and probably 70s. So I think the answer for those that are successful, Steve, what I have found personally is it's not just about the running, the core, and now I know we're getting very specific, but it's a specific question. I have found that strengthening the core and the work that is necessary to put in outside of just the running is essential to maintain, to be injury free for me. That's what I found. There's no magic formula. I've got a couple nicks right now that I'm working through, but the cycle of injury, especially in running or cycling, if the core and those portions are not exercised, what I found as I've aged, I'm at 54, I've found the last few years that is essential to be injury free longer term, and to then be able to enjoy the running aspect. The other piece is more very focused runs, meaning limited speed work and tempo work. And most of the runs are slower, but the ones that are very focused are very specific to speed and tempo. So anyway, core work outside of just running, whereas the 20s, you could roll out of bed and do whatever, 5K, 10K, 20-mile run. Can't do that anymore. So it's a game of adjustments is what I've found. And I like that. I'm not saying I like injury, but I like to be challenged by that because it allows you to work through it. And there can be some, I hate to say it, benefits of working through that on what you learn about yourself and your body, etc. Public versus private, great question. I was on the private side with a large-scale architectural engineering firm for my first year departing the military. It was great. Stantec is a company, North American-based firm. Still has a large office in Overland Park. Had a good experience. Coming to this job, I never thought I would be in municipal government. Never. I actually got a call from my predecessor, who I had met once or twice. We didn't have, so it wasn't like, hey, we're automatically gonna, pick this person. But I got a call out of the blue in April of 2015, saying, hey, by the way, I'm retiring in June. And his previous career was much like mine, a former Army colonel, engineer officer. Didn't know him, but I guess in retrospect, the city was looking for something different maybe than internal. 5-minute conversation, took the call and scratched my head after. It's like, what was that about? The last thing I want to do again is transition into another job. I didn't really enjoy the transitional process, was fairly happy, but then started really looking at the skill set associated with what I had done in the military, in particular as an Army Corps of Engineer, district commander, engineering, project delivery, construction, and decided, and leadership role, and decided, hey, that's probably a better fit for the skills you can bring, I could bring to the, hopefully bring to the table to go. The other piece is, as a military officer, served for 26 years, really a public servant. So from that perspective, it was, I wouldn't say a better fit, but I was more accustomed to, providing a service and the public. The other big draw for me was I work in the city that I live in, and really it's an opportunity to give back every day to the community, hopefully give back to the community every day. The negative on that is, when I'm driving home, I'm seeing infrastructure. I'm like, hey, there's a curb there, there's a light there, there's this there, and it never really goes away. But I got a great team, and I have to throttle back sometimes, say, we'll get to that. I'll write it down. And, because when the director calls, like, hey, we need to fix that right away. No, that's not the case. Let's go through the process of identifying things that need to be fixed. So I think from public service, it was a unique opportunity probably in Overland Park. And what I've learned now is very rare for somebody external in organizations to get a call and then go through the hiring process, because a lot of organizations are internal based, regardless of maybe the best skill set. It's been a huge lesson learned on that as I've transitioned out of the military. So hope that answered your question, Steve. Thank you for the specifics on running too.
You alluded a bit there to some things about the transition, and I think Marilyn wants to talk a little bit about that.
Yes. Well, Tony and I kind of had a little bit of a conversation because we were both trying to figure out how to get on here. Okay. So we met then. But first of all, Tony, I want to tell you thank you for your service. Know a little bit about the Corps of Engineers. So I give you kudos on that. My question is, what was the most difficult part about transitioning from the military to becoming a civilian?
Hard question, Marilyn. By the way, Marilyn and I were on Google Hangouts, Randy, which is one part of it. So we were hanging out on Google, chatting with each other prior. It's like, you know, Marilyn, I should probably, it's about 8:30. I'm going to go check the thing piece. So I apologize if I held you up, Randy and group today, but we were hanging out on Google. I think I want to give you a bit of a long answer because it's a fascinating process with the military transition. Very good friend of mine, Dr. Art DeGroat, is the Director of Military Affairs at Kansas State University. PhD, his dissertation was on the military transition process. Art is who I consider the expert on the military transition. Art and I had met years ago, as after I had transitioned out. And one of the things he said was, it takes 3 to 5 years for a career military person, or, you know, whether it's Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, Coast Guard, 3 to 5 years to fully to transition out. And when I heard that, I kind of laughed. No way. And now here I'm 7 years, almost, well, November 30th of 2013 was my last official day. Totally concur. I think, Marilyn, the answer depends on when somebody is transitioning out. For instance, if you're transitioning out after just a couple of years, you've obviously been indoctrinated. The military does a great job of the indoctrination. I mean that with all due respect. I mean, the Army's been doing it since June of 1775. Yeah. But they don't put you back out necessarily. They do it as best they can, but that's not their mission. My point on that is, if you've only been in for a couple of years, you go back to the society that you once were part of. It's not that long of a transition, so you're more accustomed to what you were prior to going in. Like myself, or I don't want to speak for Mike Kinney, but I know Mike did 22 years. You're somewhat institutionalized in a system for, you know, over 2 decades. That transition is a little bit more. So I think the hardest, if you want to call it hardest part, was taking the time to really determine what do you want to do. And the other piece, and I'm still getting there, is who are you? Your mission was set in the military. What's your purpose was set. Now the question is, for me, it's really helped to kind of define my own personal purpose, to inspire self-improvement in others through action and word. It's taken me a while to get there. To take a step back and identify what is your purpose as a person. For me anyway, that was kind of on automatic pilot mode in the military. You go from position to position, and move to move, and the mission really stays the same. Now, obviously, I've got a daytime mission with my current organization, but who are you as an individual, and what is your purpose? So I think those have, from a 20+ year transitional perspective, have been eye-opening to me, and frankly, it's still getting there, but I think I've made some progress in the last few years.
Well, just to let you know, in the private sector, after retirement, it's not real easy either. It's hard to not be who you were.
Well, I think what I've found personally is anybody, when they transition out of something for something they've been doing a long time, if they've got a purpose, those that I've seen, maybe health-wise and mentally and being engaged, you know, sometimes you say, well, I'll look forward to retirement. What I think maybe folks don't often realize is the engagement with people on a day-to-day basis, when it goes away and it's cold, meaning there's no engagement. When you had engagement, not all the engagements sometimes are fun, with supervisory positions, but when that goes away, I'm not sure, some folks often don't realize the mental aspect. I mean, a lot of us are dealing with COVID, being at home, not being engaged, person to person. And I think that has a mental component too. So I think if somebody has a fallback purpose, even better if you have identified that purpose while you're in your current career, it's a softer landing maybe on the other side, both from a military or non-military aspect.
Let's go to Chantel.
So you had talked about, Tony, your parents. I'm curious more about how they influenced your grit with some of the lessons that they taught.
Well, and I say this, my mom's looking down on me. My mom was born and she was a 12-year-old in World War II. I mean, she would tell me stories about riding her bike and having to hit the deck for bombers coming in, grew up in Germany. I think that kind of tells you who my mom was. She was tough, but fair. And I learned a lot from her. And I say that with all due respect. My mother was awesome, tough lady, very talented. Coming to America, could barely speak English after marrying my father. And my dad, Depression era baby, youngest of, I think, 7, and no formal education. Joined the military, learned a skill, started his own automatic transmission shop in 1954 in a town of 700 people that still exists today. And it's taken, really in the last couple of years, really to maybe give them full credit for what they achieved. But I think a lot of that rubbed off on my sister Anita and I, who's completing 30 plus years with Great Clips at the end of this month. What a tremendous career. And my sister's a tremendous individual. But I think, Chantel, that mentality and hey, don't feel sorry for yourself. You got to get back up. You got to continue to move on. That was kind of ingrained in us as kids. Also, the area I grew up in was a very no frills area. Expectation was you have the other person's back, you're a team player, you're part of the community, everybody knows each other, and you contribute. So I think all of those combined has helped me. But my parents were awesome and always encouraging and challenging us in their own way for where and how we grew up. Chantel, I hope that answered your question. Thank you.
Well, you've intrigued me now. I got to jump in before we go to Mike Kenny. Did your mom ever talk about, I mean, she had enough age and wisdom to have observations about growing up in Nazi Germany. How did she come to America, and what did she compare between those two lifestyles?
She didn't talk a lot about, I think they were, the family was, I don't think they fully knew what was transpiring in Germany. Her father was actually killed by an American. He had one eye, so he was. My point is, he was one of the very few that was not put into duty due to his physical condition, but ended up being shot and killed by an American. So you put those together, Randy, and my mother then, I mean, she married my father, who came in just post World War II. And I don't know what her mother thought. Wow, here's an American after her, her father was killed by an American. Never really got into that conversation. But I think when I look at what my mother achieved, to take the risk of, marrying an American and then coming to America. She used to talk a lot about when she came to rural Minnesota, she expected, hey, America, it's America. She's coming to Bruton, Minnesota. No offense, my hometown was great, but I think, she grew up in Bamberg, Germany, a beautiful area, larger city that didn't get much damage during World War II. And where does she end up? She ends up in rural Minnesota, can barely speak English, and is taking, kind of side hustle jobs while my father's trying to establish his career and his transmission shop, from scratch. So it was really lean times for them. She used to talk a lot about that, really lean times initially. But I think through their grit and determination, obviously became small business owners and a successful small business that still is thriving today with the Hofmann name. As a kid, a 7th or 8th grader, my father and mother transitioned that business to a guy named Jerry Voss, who I knew well. And now Jerry and I know each other, still keep in touch. Now Jerry's son has taken it over. So all of that combined, I think, gives a picture of maybe what my mother saw initially in America. It wasn't really exactly what was probably expected, but then through their really resilience and staying the course, having confidence in each other and building a business and a successful life together in small town Minnesota, really shone through at the end.
Let's go to Mike Kinney.
Tony, great to see you. I'm one of your biggest fans, as you know. No, hey, we talk about grit all the time, you and I, but tied to that, motivation. So you've done tons of stuff, super hard stuff, and even stuff that's mundane, and between being goal-oriented, call it teleological, whatever it might be, the driving factors, I'm sure, are goal accomplishment, but then also, hey, professionals see things through no matter what. What keeps you motivated and target focused in the hardest of times?
Wow. I think I think at the end of the day, to see things through when they're challenging, that's when, when you're in a leadership role, that's when you're really tested. So I think what motivates you is to accomplish the task that needs to be accomplished, Mike, is a motivating factor. It's not always pretty. I mean, when I look at what transpired in uniform in 2011, the Joplin tornado, I got a call Tuesday, it was a Sunday tornado, actually in a different region. It was actually the Little Rock, Arkansas district's responsibility. But they called us in from Kansas City and said, by the way, you all will be leading the cleanup effort. I was like, what? And now you're mobilizing a team to get down where 162 people have perished, and you're seeing a landscape of 6 miles long by a half mile wide that I've never seen before, that is totally wiped out. Never seen anything like that before in a combat zone or anything. You're like, wow. And we moved 1.7 million cubic yards of debris in 3 months. That is a football field as high as the Eiffel Tower of debris that had to get done to allow Joplin to, reconstitute themselves and get back to their new norm at the time, while simultaneously managing a very political hotbed of flooding of 150 levees in northern Missouri and Kansas that are inundated, that are, 3 miles from the main stem Missouri River. You can't see irrigation systems that are 7 feet high. So I think it's our role, it's hey, this is our job. This is what we're set out to do. And we have to see this through thick or thin. to me, it's kind of, that's just what you get paid to do. And we've got to figure it out. So I think that's a motivating factor. I think in some cases with those two things, I don't think we ever got as much full credit. You didn't hear about it in the news much because those missions actually went very, very well. But I think the accomplishment was watching the team accomplish it. And I think a lot of folks that were part of both of those were able to learn about themselves because a lot of folks were volunteers that said, I'm not sure I can do this. Said, look, you can do this. We just need you. I know your leadership capability. We just need you there. And they learn, and I think they learned a lot about themselves. So I think getting to the role of the leader and what the task is at hand, that's your role, and your job is to lead it. That's a motivating factor to me. On a personal level, I know Steve mentioned the running. I think it's, for me, it's, that has been a very important aspect for me, physically and mentally, to give yourself, to push yourself to a high standard. To me, the basic standard every year is the Boston Marathon. That's a tough standard. It's still hard for me. It doesn't get easier, but it is a gold standard to me. That's always my number one goal every year, is to requalify, which you got to do, and get back to the Boston Marathon. And because that standard, they expect it. The people in that area, and everybody knows that race, that's the standard expected. And that's great. It's great to have a high standard, but not so much that it becomes all encompassing and you go down a bad path. So I hope that kind of helped, Mike.
Appreciate it, Tony. Appreciate you.
Did you run the marathon the year of the bombing?
I did. Yeah. Joel and I had a good conversation on that. 2013, very somber day. I was about 45 minutes in front of it. Frankly, didn't even know it occurred. Was literally walking back into where I was staying, got a call from work, and they said, "Are you okay?" And I'm not joking about what transpired, but I said, "No, I'm not okay. I just ran the Boston Marathon." They said, "Well, no, you don't know what happened." And I didn't. Went out walking around as I normally do. I try to go to a local place at the end of the race every time. Usually fly out on Tuesday, but it was a eerie, somber city, and talked to somebody who was a volunteer at the race, because there's a ton of volunteers, and she was in her probably low 20s, and she was shaken up. I don't even know if she was right there, but it was a tough day. And as I told Joel, flew back on Tuesday. There were some media folks, in Kansas City at KCI, waiting to talk to folks. That was fine. But I had an FBI agent in my office on Wednesday morning at the Army Corps of Engineer Kansas City District, and they were talking to each runner to see if you saw anything. So it was an amazingly hard day, hard process. But the positive, I'm not saying anything positive, but 2014, being there in 2014 for the redemption, if you want to call it that, on a beautiful day, was an amazing experience. To see, people, hey, we're going to run this race. And anyway, so kind of the lows of lows and the highs of highs within a year. Yeah.
Matt has a question.
Hey, Tony, good to see you. I'm a few months out from retiring myself from the Army. Matter of fact, I'm taking a break from my online SFL TAP course. You guys will know what that is.
Yeah.
So this is a much better use of my time, I think. And I appreciate.
Hope so.
Yeah, appreciate everything you had to say. My question is, so you've got you bring together all these folks that they go do the Leadville. What do you possibly do to convince people to follow you into the breach when your sales offer is it's going to be grueling, it's going to be painful, it's going to be miserable, so let's go.
Yeah, we didn't, hey, Matt, thanks for your service. If you need anything on the transition, I'll give you an opinion and, you know, may or may not help you along the way. Yeah, we didn't talk about Team Leadville. So you heard about the 100-mile run. That really led me to say, hey, look, this would be a great venue to have a marathon team that starts and finishes as a team. Along the way, the first year in 2015, when we did that, the first convincing was over beer and barbecue at Jack Stack Barbecue here in Overland Park in October of 2014. Got them limbered up, beer, barbecue, little discussion with some former military colleague and their subordinates that came out. They were training at Fort Leavenworth for an exercise. And then I zapped the marathon question on them after they were limbered up after about an hour and a half. And half of them bought in about just doing a marathon. I think we can do it. What I didn't tell them was the venue's going to be Leadville. I knew it would be, but I wanted to see if they would buy into a team, say marathon, I'll help you train from a distance. And they did. They went back to their Joint Base Lewis McChord near Tacoma, Washington. One of the runners, a funny story, Army Major Dan Keyser was one who adamantly said, I will never run a marathon. Nope, not in. Here we are. He has run all 6 years with us. Along the way though, Matt, that first year, actually Dan had the idea, hey, why don't we support a veteran cause along with our team? And I said, knock yourself out. I don't think I have the time, meaning I'm already kind of engaged with the team, trying to figure out how we're gonna do this. And we did. We did it with the what's called the IAVA. It's more of a policy level nonprofit, and they do good work. We raised about $7,000 that year. But all of that combined, Matt, and I'll get to your specific answer here on how I think. When I say I think, you really got to talk to the runners. It led us to, I'd heard about Warriors Ascent, which obviously Mike Kinney is the executive director. And I thought the veteran suicide epidemic was getting more and more national attention. And knowing that Warriors Ascent was here, Mike had literally, I think it was January of 2015, taken over as the executive director. So I reached out to the organization, actually prior to Mike being selected as the executive director, because I thought, here's a Kansas City-based nonprofit. I know they do great work, effective work. Let's support them. And actually, it's probably one of Mike Kinney's first meetings in his new role. I think he was in the role 3 weeks. We were down at the market having lunch, and no offense, Mike probably sees this differently. When I approached him and said, hey, I got a marathon team. We just completed a marathon and we want to raise money for you. And we're doing it up in Leadville at 13,185 feet. I think when I saw Mike's eyes, I don't think he was believing it. And I walked away from that like, that's fine. Well, I'm confident that was a good challenge for me. You'll be a believer after we accomplish it. But I think the key for the runners, and a lot of them come back, I'll take a team of 15. We're actually going to make, they have a heavy half as well. That'll be a new addition to the 2021 portion. But all the runners, and doesn't have to be veterans, most of them are veterans, but we've got some non-veterans in there as well. What it is, Matt, is it's not only the team, it gives them a purpose, I think. It gives them a reason to work out on a very challenging race. But they also know they have to be all in with respect to garnering donations for a cause. And when you combine all of those things, I think that's a very motivational piece to give back for each of the runners, veteran or not. You really have to ask the runners that are crazy enough to do it. We're not setting any speed records out there, but I'm amazed that I get repeat performers. Heather Bain, former Army Captain Heather Bain, and current Army Major Dan Keyser, they have been with me on this journey for all 6 years. All 6 years. and Heather works for Amazon now, out in Colorado. And the other person, Randy Cuccio, Randy's 60 something, 2 major back surgeries. And he has run 5 of the 6 years with us. I think it's the full package of not only the event, but more important, I think more important is the purpose of why we run, and that they've got to be all in. That's an expectation that we lay out. You've got to be part of the donation piece as well. It's not just posting on social media. Yeah, I accomplished this on my own. I'm vetting them for being a part of the team, and it's all in. And I don't mean that derogatory, but they know what they're getting into. And I'm very upfront with what our standard is. I've had runners come to me and say, I'd love to run with you, or I'd love to go out and join your team, but I don't want to run with the team. I'm like, this ain't for you then. This is a team effort. You know, some of us are faster than others. That's not the intent. If you want to do that, go solo. This is a team effort. We're starting and finishing as a team, and it's a purpose that is to support a veteran cause. So Matt, I think it's all those combined. Sorry for the long diatribe, but there's some history there as to the why it draws folks. So.
Well, that is awesome, Tony. Keep telling the story. You've got lessons folks can learn from. The book, if none of you have it, Embracing Grit. It's on Amazon. I know, I'm not sure where else, but I know I got one, and then one of my boys stole it, and I got another one. Another boy stole it, so then I got another one. So they keep vanishing.
I'll get you more books. I know Joel's got one. I know Angie's got a new book out. Randy, don't worry. Let me know if you need more.
Yeah, that's cool that they're taking them and reading them. So it's a great story. I appreciate you spending time with us, Tony. It was awesome.
Randy, I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody on this call. I know some of you, you know, I do have a website. I don't do a lot with it. I try to balance as best I can. TonyHoffmangrit.com. I am on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. I don't do much with Instagram. I'm on Facebook, but my Facebook pieces are just not a whole lot. Primarily LinkedIn and the website. And I try to do that in my quote unquote free time. I am looking at a second volume. I know Joel sounds like just completed his book. I know we chatted about that. I've got to get to writing now on that second volume of Embracing Grit in the Endurance and Grit series. I know conceptually where I want to go, and that second volume will be about Team Leadville and the fight to stop veteran suicide. And I'm looking forward to finishing that. My goal is by May of 2021 to do that. So.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Tony. Look forward to seeing all of you hopefully next week. And hopefully you saw on the email, it's an hour later than normal. But when you're dealing with a 96-year-old, you work around his schedule. And so it's it's a special story. I've spent a lot of time with Edgar Harrell, and it's incredible to hear him tell his story of his own perseverance in a really unbelievably difficult time, and what they went through, and how they made it back. And there's lessons I've taken from him that I'll never forget, when he just talks about the sense of purpose and how that keeps you going when there's no hope. And so hopefully you can join and hear that. It's a really special message. Well, everybody have a great weekend, and we will see you next week.
Take care.
Thanks, Tony.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tony.